to order. We have first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and we need to, we do have an executive session listed for evaluation of a public employee, and we also need to add onto that contract negotiations, the premature knowledge of which would put the district at a disadvantage. So is everyone on the board good with that? Amending it that way? Excellent. Anyone who's not, please speak up. Okay. And then we will move on to, I need a motion to approve the minutes from October 21st. Would someone make that motion, please?
So moved, Tammy. This is Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Is there a second?
Lenny will second it. Oop.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Either Len or Georgianne, you could take either one of them. Thank you both. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Revisions, corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from October 21st, and that would be the regular meeting and the professional development session, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone who's opposed to that, please say no. Hearing none. The minutes are approved. And we will move on to public input and announcements. Tonight we have a few people who want to speak, and Dave is going to tell me who they are. But before we do that, I'd just like to remind folks generally of you know, the usual guidelines. That please state your full name, tell us where you're coming from. Please, everyone tonight is going to have 3 minutes to speak. So when 30 seconds are left, I will let you know that, and please wrap up your comments when your time is up, and I would appreciate that. The other thing is that I know that some people are speaking to some school-related issues with regard to scheduling and remote learning and hybrid learning. And I think I have some people who are speaking to our flag policy that's up for a first reading tonight. So for anyone who's going to speak during public comment to the flag policy, I would ask you respectfully to please keep your comments to the policy itself generally, and to not speak to any particular flags, because when and if the policy is approved, and this tonight is only up for a first reading, but if it is ultimately approved, and if there are flag requests that do come to the board, at that point would be the time where we would have far more extensive public input related to whatever flag request may be before the board. So tonight I'd just like to keep those comments to the policy itself. So that being said, Dave, who do we have that wants to speak this evening?
Thanks, Tammy. We have 4 folks with us for public comment in the following order. First, we have Stephanie Mosier, followed by Nan Dubin, then Todd Fillmore, and then Crystal Usher. All, I believe, are with us by video this evening. So Stephanie Mosier would be up first.
Okay. Hi, Stephanie. Where are you? I just saw you before.
Hi, how are you?
You are. So let me just get I'm not good at multitasking and trying to get everything together at the same time and not disconnecting myself. So let me just get the timer, and I will let you know when are you ready to start?
I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Moser. I'm a Clarendon resident. I'm a former board member of the school district. I'm a parent of 4 Mill River High School students, and I have recently considered moving my children out of the school district. I echo the sentiments made by Mr. Aker last month regarding Mill River's need to turn its attention to the children's education and align with current times. Businesses and schools around the state and country quickly reorganized and created new ways of doing things when the pandemic hit. This school system did not. The education our children have received since this past spring is inadequate and unacceptable. The schedule and quality both need to be addressed. The state of Vermont has led collaborative meetings with Dr. Levine, Dr. Brina Holmes of the Maternal Child Health Division, Vermont pediatricians, child care school nurses, superintendents, and more since the beginning of the pandemic to guide the state with the most up-to-date research. The state experts encouraged return to in-person education this fall. The school district ignored this guidance. The state continues to support in-person education and notes it is an essential activity. The experts continue to state that schools are safe, and at this point, they are not where COVID cases are being transmitted. As a nurse leader, I utilize this information to guide the nurses that I am working with and that are working with families and children throughout the state of Vermont. I encourage the school district to follow the expert guidance. I am happy to share resources if you would like them. The current system has been referred to as hybrid. I challenge this description. Our children are receiving 2 days of in-person instruction, which includes 1 meeting for each class per week. Children do not have access to teachers on 2 days of the week. Combine this with poor or non-existent instruction, as I have shared with Mr. Wiedemann, and our children are left to teach themselves and each other.
Stephanie,
Our children,
30 seconds.
our children are being left behind. So I question, how is it that other schools across the state and across the country have figured out a way to have in-person education for our high schoolers, yet we cannot? I believe we can do better by our children. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Tammy, next up you have Nan Dubin, also with us by video.
Hi, Nan. How are you? Let me start. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted. If you go down to the bottom, there's 3 dots and your microphone will show up there. There you are. Okay, I will start the timer now.
Okay, now I'm looking only at myself. I've lost all of you, but that's okay. I only need a few seconds to thank you for your work on the flag policy. I think that's going to help clarify things for people. It's going to make it easier for people to know if they can make a request, how to make a request, and what that process is going to be like. So I just want to thank you because you've worked really hard on this, and I look forward to the culmination of that and then what will come next for Mill River. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nan.
Tammy, next you have Todd Fillmore with us by video.
Hi, Todd. How are you?
Good evening, Tammy. Good evening, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Todd Fillmore from Shrewsbury, as many of you folks know, and I speak tonight on behalf of several hundred residents in our communities. I've never doubted the emotional sincerity of board members who voted to fly the Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ flags on school flagpoles. But as elected legislators, the board cannot rely on impulsive emotions. You represent a diverse community, and you were elected to focus on the educational needs of the entire community and to adhere to state and federal laws. And it's here in the intersection of logic and law that attempts to fly any flags other than the US and Vermont flags will trigger a major legal problem. And that problem is easy to understand. I'm free to fly any flag of my choice on my own property. Likewise, board members are free to fly flags of your choice on your own properties, as are students. But I do not have the legal right to force you to fly my flag on your property, no matter how strongly I feel. And there lies the problem. Public school flagpoles are community property. If the school board chooses to fly a flag of their choice on our community of school flagpoles, they are leveraging the power of local government to force the entire community, including me, to fly their flags on our property. And that is a violation of the Vermont Constitution. This policy goal nakedly relies on the battering ram of government speech, a legal concept found in forms like license plate slogans such as the Green Mountain State. But the board's goal is a radical departure from generic slogans. It is pure political speech, and the board would link their preferred political ideas and their organizations to the state government of Vermont while silencing voices of dissent. Legally, that would constitute compelled speech. It's a concept viewed with contempt by our Supreme Courts, especially when used to violate the First Amendment rights of adults and students alike. And the public record clearly shows that this has been precisely the board's actions thus far. By now, the board has received a letter from national law firm Liberty Counsel on our behalf detailing the likely legal outcome of policy G17, the flag policy. Make no mistake, if the board affirms policy G17 and flies flags of their choosing, you will be the architects of an even bigger rift in the community and will trigger a legal challenge that will almost certainly end up in a high court, resulting in further division, further controversy, and significant legal cost to the community. In the end, the board will almost certainly lose, and it will be obvious that such expense and aggravation to taxpayers was merely to satisfy the desires of the board with no tangible educational benefit to be found. Thank you. I appeal to the board's good sense to avert such an unnecessary waste of time and resources. I urge the board to scrap G17 and get back to the business of educating our kids. The U.S. flag and the Vermont flags are all inclusive. They are adequate to the purpose that they were intended. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on education and let's get back to business. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
Final speaker tonight is Crystal Usher, who is also with us by video.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi, give me just a moment.
Sure. Let me know when you're ready. I'll start the timer.
Okay.
There
Yep.
you go.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Crystal Usher, a Clarendon resident and taxpayer, parent of a 7th, 10th, and a senior at Mill River. And I would like to express my concerns with the lack of education my children are receiving during this pandemic. Our children are receiving minimal organized school day structure with a mild accountability. The requirement to only answer a basic question to count as attendance on remote learning days is not providing them with structure or education. The governor has stated the priority and best interest of our youth is to provide them with in-person learning. Statistics are showing the spread of the virus is not within schools, but consistent with private social gatherings and those not wearing masks. A local school has announced their first positive case and have moved that class to remote learning for a 2-week period, while the school will remain open with in-person instruction after sanitization is completed today. Clearly, they have faith in the statistics. Why is Mill River unique from other schools and unable to accommodate in-person learning? And why can we provide in-person learning to our elementary students, yet unable to do so for the middle and high school? I am not aware of another school in the state that is limiting in-person class to 2 days a week with no remote learning. Most are providing in-person along with remote learning. An added concern I have is with the continued need to release Track A students for the monthly Monday half-day. As a result of this plan, my 7th and 10th grader will only have a total of 9 hours in-person learning this week. Fortunately, my senior is receiving most of her education at Stafford and benefiting from their structure. Lastly, it concerns me that a Mill River teacher is unable to provide in-person learning, I am told due to a health risk concern, and has continued with remote learning even on in-person days. At minimum, our children should expect and deserve in-person time with their teachers on the single day that they have that class each week. In reviewing the 2019 school data report, I found our enrollment and testing scores start sliding at the 7th and 8th grade level, continuing through high school years. As a taxpayer of this district and a concerned parent, I am less than satisfied with our current learning structure. I urge the superintendent, board, and faculty to prioritize education over other topics and quickly find a way to provide a better education to our youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Dave, is that anyone else?
That's all we have for public comment, Tammy.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who spoke this evening. I'd remind those members of the public, if you could kindly log off now and join, you could continue to watch the meeting, please, on the live stream. I would appreciate that. And thank you all for your comments. And we'll move on with our next item on the agenda is our principal updates. So who would like to go first? Fred is looking so anxious. I knew he was going to raise his hand. Go ahead, Fred.
I love to share. Thank you, Tammy. I know you have a long board meeting tonight, so I'll keep it very brief. 2 things. First, the kids have been easing their way back in and getting into the routine. And this week, we could see it, that they are back and happy. They were skipping, communicating, keeping their distance. We probably had about 50 kids rolling down the hill in the back, just having fun. But they were all basically like it used to be. I got to give the credit. The second thing would be, I want to spend a little bit of time just saying thank you to our staff. They're caring for the kids. They're spending time with the kids. They're getting them what they need. They're individualizing instruction and yet preparing for the potential of going remote at some point because of the way the state's moving. So I give them all credit for working extremely hard, caring for the kids, and making them as happy as they are. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Maureen, I saw your hand going up too, but Fred got it. How are you?
I have to echo what Fred is saying. The kids are ecstatic to be back. They're joyful. They're skipping. The teachers are joyful at skipping, not when you're looking. But the other pieces that I wanted to share was that we are in the midst of, we've been approached by the community to build a literature in the woods path. And that is just in such a divisive period of time right now, between the election and the flag and everything else. It was so nice to have a community member reach out and offer to kind of coordinate this literature in the woods. The community, we put it up on a GoFundMe site, and it was funded within 2 hours by community members. And the conservation board is on board, the owner of the property is on board, and we already have parents who volunteered to help the kids build it. So there's a little glimmer of light in these times. I think we'll get through this divisiveness, and it's working up at Timoth. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Jody, how about what's going on up in Shrewsbury?
Everything's going wonderfully. Both our remote learners and our in-person learners are definitely in the swing of things and really, doing amazing with their instruction. I would echo the statement that Fred made that our teachers are just working so hard to meet every kid's needs, and I'm just so proud to work with them. Some exciting things going on. We've started the construction for our Onsite compost system through our partnership with Sage. If you haven't been up to school lately, it's worth a look. It's going to be awesome and provide kids hands-on learning, including data collection, and a great model for local schools and communities on how to do on-site composting. We're working with our PTO to send home seedlings for Thanksgiving because we can't be together this year, so kids can grow some herbs that will hopefully be ready by Christmas dinner, continuing our farm to school work even in winter. We were supposed to have an artist in residency last April that got canceled because of COVID with Cyan Camara Drumming, which is a West Guinean drummer. And we have that set up for the first week of December virtually. So really excited about that. The other thing I wanted to mention, Len had requested an update on restorative practice. Would it be okay to do that quickly?
If you don't mind, let me do Dan and Tyler, and then I can circle back to you if that's okay. Great. Thanks. Dan, why don't you fill us in on Wallingford?
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to share at these meetings. It's always good to give some positive updates. I'm going to echo my colleagues. The staff meeting we had today, we did a kudos session when we got started, and there was definitely an awkward moment of silence, or maybe a few. And then they started to speak up and just share their appreciation for some of the other staff members who've helped them out one way or another. So they're really leaning on each other during this time to help support the students. And I couldn't ask for anything more. So that was just a great start to the staff meeting. The rest of it went pretty well too. But the other thing is, we made some arrangements and some adjustments when we first returned back in person with all the health screening. And we've got that underway now, and everything's set in stone. We've been able to tighten up our time for arrival, and we had really positive feedback on the arrival and dismissal. So far, we haven't had cars backing up into the street yet, so that's a good, safe thing. And I will give credit to our parents. I had one parent in particular who kind of took it upon herself to gather input from some other parents, and they came up with a good idea for a release of siblings of certain grade levels that were being released before others. And so the siblings leave at the same time and they hop in the car at the same time, and that car's gone and frees up a spot for the next group to come. It's something that just seems like it's common sense, but it didn't occur to any of us. So it came from the parents, and we appreciate that communication. I did want to point out with our teachers, we are in person, but we can't forget about, like Jody mentioned, there are still our students who are doing remote learning, and for a very good reason. And so that extra hour, at least at the elementary school, that we feel we may have lost is almost inadequate for our teachers to prep their lessons for the remote learners and to touch base with them. So just in some conversations this week, I know that it is an extra strain, but it's well worth it to be able to offer our families those opportunities that really needed to keep them safe and healthy during this concerning time. So I appreciate that and all the efforts and thought that has gone into how we rolled out this year. And that's all I got from Wallingford.
Thank you, Dan. Tyler, how are things at the high school?
Good evening. Things are going really well. We haven't spoken since we went back in person. So we give you a little background. We did our PSAT for our juniors the Thursday before we came back, and we had approximately 60 kids taking the PSAT in both of our gyms, our multipurpose room and our regular gym. That was really a success. Kids, I'm surprised at how many kids did show up for that and were successful in taking the test. So it's kind of a dry run for us before we had kids back in the building. And I gotta say that our return to in-person has been extremely smooth. It has been really good. Our first day, I got a little bit worried when kids were coming into the building because we had a little bit of a backup on Middle Road, and I apologize if anyone heard anything in the community about that. But since that first day, I think everyone was really excited to get back in the building, and they all showed up at once. And again, I got a little nervous, but we haven't had that since. And our kids are coming into the building, and I really do wish you guys could come into the building as much as possible because it's amazing how the kids have adapted. You wouldn't know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, except for the masks. It's really is a great feeling in the building. The kids are doing well. The teachers are doing well. And, my only wish is that we could have everyone in the building, but it's just not possible keeping our, 6 feet social distancing requirements in the classrooms and what have you. But like I said, things are going really well. Kids are adapting, and we're looking forward to more days in person. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jody, if you're ready to give us a restorative justice update, we'd love to have it. Thank you.
Sure thing. So switching gears over to the restorative practice pieces that were put into our 3-year equity plan. One was restorative practice focused external expert led training for all staff that is still scheduled for this spring with Rebecca Haslam. 2 was that the leadership team would review the principles and philosophy of restorative practice together for some professional learning. We did complete that in August. 3 was that all building leaders will commit to engaging students in reflection and restorative process instead of discipline when possible. So we all made that collective commitment in August and have continued to work towards that. The one HHB investigation that, to my knowledge, we have done so far this year, restorative practices, was what we use to handle anything within that. So we're continuing our work to really just think about character development first. And the next step was that the leadership team will engage in reflection on the process to center disciplinary issues 3 times over the 2020 to 21 school year. So we have our next reflection point set up for our December leadership team meeting, and we'll look at some data together. The piece that we've added to this so far is that this summer, Andrew's been designing a variety of self-paced professional development workshops, and we will add a restorative practice one for teachers this summer who want to push further into the realm of understanding restorative practice. And again, this is just the first steps in this process. We want to build capacity with our leadership team and then build greater capacity throughout our entire organization as we go, just so that there's true deep understanding and commitment to that work.
Great. I'm going to ask the board members if they have any questions. Len, anyone? Questions for Jody? Okay. Thank you, Jody. Okay, we will move on to central office report. So Dave.
Yeah, thank you. And for the board, you unfortunately are going to hear a lot from me over the next couple agenda items. So I'm going to keep this really brief. Our leadership team, our administrators know that I start every meeting with the question of going around the room and sharing something good and starting out a meeting with the positives that we see and what we have going on. So that's actually what I'd like to do in the course of this brief report. I'm proud of our folks. So we've had elementary students back in person, pre-K through 4 since October 19th. We've had grades 5 through 12 in person since November 2nd. And what I see every day is all of our people, from our youngest students up to our most veteran teachers, our administrators, our bus drivers, our paraeducators, everybody in the system working their tails off and doing it with a smile on their face. Even though you can't really see the smile, you have to see the smile in people's eyes because of the masks. But I see students that are happy to be back at school and enjoying it. I see teachers and support staff that are hustling and making good things happen for kids. I see everyone with a realization that we want to embrace being with each other in person as long as we can. But let's be honest, it's scary out there and we don't really know what's around the corner. But that said, people are still putting the time in and putting the work in and trying to deliver the best possible product they can for our kids. And that's really, really exciting. It makes me proud of everybody that is a student in our system and everybody that works in our system. I'm just grateful. So lots more to say on the upcoming agenda items, but I'll turn it over to Brian at this point.
Okay. Brian.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well in these continuingly interesting times. I'll keep my report brief too. Talking about the two areas I'm going to talk about, I'll say that we're doing what we can with what we have. Problem solving, flexibility, and planning are coming in huge for us. It's a very different world. So where we could have just turned around and made things happen a certain way in the past, we can't really do that anymore. But I'm impressed with folks' flexibility, the planning that they're taking on, and the problem solving that they're diving into to make things happen. Technology, we can't just order a bunch of computers if we need some new computers. So we've been cranking out Chromebook repairs more than we've ever done, which is really interesting. Our two guys have been phenomenal in trying to get to things quickly and trying to do a lot of things that they maybe never had done before. We're learning a lot and we're trying to make it work to keep everybody moving along. The health office, same themes there. Sat down Monday and we had some really great conversations around, are we prepared for when we get the health department call? And I'm very impressed with what we do have in place, even though that health office is still having to deal with vaccinations and deadlines and all the normal work that we'd have to do. It's phenomenal how much folks are pitching in and doing that little bit extra to make sure we do have everything in line for the next thing that might be coming down the road. So, folks are working very hard. I think folks are working with passion, and having a purpose definitely makes it easier to do. I do know that folks are tired too, though. So huge shout out to everybody and what they've been pitching in to make all of this work.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And I agree. On behalf of the board, I think I speak for all of my fellow board members when we said that we are appreciative of everything that everyone in the district is doing to make this work. I see a lot of head nods agreeing with me, and we really do appreciate it. And we often don't say that far enough. So thank you. So we'll move on. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I'll just focus on one thing tonight that Jody already alluded to. So something I've been working on for a while is to develop an in-house professional development or training kind of system. And so what I've put together right now is a menu of options for teachers. There's two kind of streams. One is virtual workshops. The other is self-paced modules, similar to what we did over this past summer. Right now we have 5 different options, and what we'll be doing is building that over time and also providing opportunities for teachers within the district to propose a workshop or module and then to lead that as well. And this is really an opportunity for educators to earn relicensure credits, since we're not really doing a whole lot of out-of-district professional development opportunities. And so that's something that we'll continue to build throughout this year, led by MRU, SD administrators and teachers, focused specifically on things that are aligned with our district instructional vision and in line with the needs of teachers based on survey data that we collected back in September and that we'll collect again probably in January, February to see where needs are at.
Thank you. Any questions for Andrew? Okay. Hi, Coral. How are you? Oh, sorry, George. George has a question.
Oh, you're muted, George.
George, you muted.
Hey, how about that? Anyways, I chatted with Brian a few days ago concerning my inability to join the board meetings. And what I've discovered, or I think I've discovered, is that if I use a link that is 3 or 4 days old, I get to where it says join and I hit the join button and nothing happens. What I've done a couple of times is had Dave send me the link an hour or two before the meeting, and here I am. So I don't know why, but that's what's happening. So Brian, there's a puzzle for you. Thank you.
I got to say, George, we thought there was a pun coming at the end of that. We were all bated breath waiting to hear it, and we didn't get one.
Well, I've given up puns for Thanksgiving. I wouldn't want anybody to think of me as some kind of a turkey.
Goodness. Hi, Coral. On that note, how are you?
Well, that is a hard one to follow. I got nothing. So in the realm of special education, we are just sort of cruising along. I think, we've all sort of adopted a mantra of just day by day, because, in the realm of special education, we are really having to consider each kid's individual circumstances when we think about the programming that we offer to them. So it's truly become a model of, no one child really getting the same type of delivery, the same type of services. It's just very, very different across the board. So that keeps people really busy. I think one of the challenges this year is just dealing with what happens when someone has to be out. So it's a lot of sort of those day-by-day fires of trying to figure out how we'll still provide services in a high-quality way and what we have to do to kind of fill in the gaps when that happens. But yeah, everyone's working really hard. Everyone is definitely tired for sure. But we're doing well and definitely feeling the reward of having the kids back with us. So that's it.
Any questions for Coral? Thank you, Coral. Hi, Gary. How are you?
Hello, folks. Realistically, not much has changed in my world since we spoke last. Our focus really still continues to be on the custodial and sanitizing end of things within our buildings, as opposed to the repair and construction world that we a lot of times deal with, although we're keeping up with that as well at this point. With Kim Maneri's much appreciated help, we continue to focus on providing reliable and safe transportation as well, which, as you can imagine, has been somewhat of a challenge with all the different schedules and routines that we now have in place. Our custodial staff seems to be settling in fairly well to the new routine of working during the day when everyone is in the building, as opposed to our old routine of coming in after hours and providing services at that point. So it's been a little bit of a learning experience for everyone, but it's working out well at this point. So I'm really happy to say that basically maybe most of everything is going according to plan at this point, at least. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
George.
I got my mic on this time. How about that? I was looking over the pay orders, Gary, and I noticed several items that were labeled truck repair, and it seemed to be a fairly high bill. What's going on?
Was it for truck or one of the buses, George?
Well, all I saw was truck. I didn't know it was mislabeled, maybe, or what.
We've been doing some work on the truck in-house. There's been some brake work, oil changes, and those type of things is probably what you're seeing. I'm just trying to keep the old truck in working order.
Well, my suspicion then that there is a label problem, or I misread it wrong, but thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Gary? Okay. Thank you, Gary. Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for having me. I haven't seen you in a while. Some of you, our after-school programs are really going well at all four of the elementary schools. The overall number of our learners is down about 20% from normal, but actually considering that we started off very slow in the beginning and have gradually gained participation as the weeks have gone on, that's actually really good place to be, particularly our larger schools. It's very much more manageable to have 30 to 32 than 45 kids staying in Clarendon and Wallingford particularly. But a couple changes this year beyond the obvious of making a lot of adjustments. And I have to say the same as, the principals are saying. I'm so appreciative of the staff that I have, particularly the site directors. They have just so stepped up and they're very focused on our learners. They're focused on programs. They're focused on families, and yet we're flexible at the same time within that. And again, I just can't say enough about how strong. I really have a bunch of rock stars in this team. They're really amazing. I also just wanted to thank principals tonight. We actually start after school at 2 p.m., given the elementary schools get out at 2. So our program actually versus 3:15 to 5:15 now goes from 2 till 5:30, which is quite an extension. And principals have all supported that with allowing us to have some teachers and paras that are still on contract from 2 to 3 as a part of our program. And that, that's not just helpful, that's been essential for us to even run after school, particularly again, our larger schools. So thanks so much for that. The kids have been outside a lot more. Nature cooperated for sure in October, November with the beautiful weather. So the more we could get them outside, the better. Another change that we've made is we do have fewer actual choices of programs and enrichments. We normally had a menu of lots of choices, and for obvious reasons of not wanting to move kids too much in transition groups, there are fewer choices, but they're absolutely high quality. The kids are really staying busy and again having a good time. So again, really going very well, thanks to particularly the staff and again, principal support.
Thank you. Any questions for Carrie? Okay, thank you. Hi, Stan, how are you?
I'm doing good. I got a short little financial summary for you. We did our tuition billing for the first half of the year, and I'll just give you an update on that. With the high school billing, we billed out 96 students, which was 9 students under what we had budgeted. We had budgeted for 105, which will leave us with about $138,000 short on our high school tuition budget currently. With our elementary tuition billing, we had budgeted for 5 students, and we are currently at 2 elementary students that we billed for. So that will leave us short by about $44,000 on the elementary tuition revenue. And overall, our tuition revenue will be down about $183,000. Our 2 biggest districts, or 2 biggest sending districts, is Middletown Springs and the Ludlow Mount Holly district. We did get a number on health insurance from VHI that they'll be submitting for approval. That it will be a 9.6% increase for next year. We are still currently doing our audit. It's going a lot slower this year because it's being done 100% remotely. So it just takes longer to scan and send them the information they're requesting. So far, everything seems going to be going okay. It's just a lot slower. And one other thing regarding our COVID relief funds, we will currently receiving four grants, which are totaling about almost $673,000. Two of these grants have deadlines that we need to have the money spent by December 31st. That would be the CRF grant, which we're receiving about $127,000, and then the HVAC grant from Efficiency Vermont, which is a little over $355,000 that we're getting from that one. So the focus will be to spend as much money as we can by the December 31st deadline on the CRF grant. And I would assume that, with the HVAC grant, we should be okay with that. I don't know if Gary can confirm that one way or the other, but I'm under the understanding we are on schedule to finish that project by the end of the year. He's nodding his head yes, so that's good. We did receive a summer program grant of a little over $6,000, and what that grant provided us was to pay our staff that we hired during the summer. So they were 100% covered by the grant. And I guess that is all that I have. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Hi, thank you. Okay. On now, Dave, do our district goal update presentation for us, please.
You bet. Thank you, Tammy. And I'm going to share my screen if that's okay with everybody. So bear with me for a moment while I prep that. And I will just ask for confirmation if you're able to see my screen. Thumbs up or something? Perfect. So for our board members and the administrators who are with us and the audience who's viewing, these are our district goals that were adopted in August of 2019. And just to review kind of what these are all about, we took a long time as a board establishing who we are, and we landed on the statement, we are a proud public school community, preparing all students for the opportunities and challenges life presents. We spent a lot of time talking about what we value. We value quality, outcomes matter. We value opportunities for all. We value support when it is needed. And we value responsible, kind, and engaged citizenship. Then if you go further, there are some expectations about these goals and how we will discuss and review and work on these goals. First expectation we put in was 2 times annual reporting from administration to board on how we're progressing. Obviously, the April scenario got a little bit sidetracked by the pandemic being in effect, and October is our normal target for presenting this to the board. I appreciate the board granting a few weeks delay on this presentation. It was helpful because it let some more of our testing data come in, so I'm able to give you better, more accurate testing data overall. The second expectation we have in place is the concept of an annual summer retreat for the board to revisit goal progress and consider any revisions. Obviously, that was not an option in 2020, but we can certainly hope that the summer of 2021 might present us with some opportunities where we can gather the board for retreat type of work to review goals and progress our way through them. I'm really pleased to let you know that something that I already knew, which is when you focus on things and you focus on improving things, you tend to improve them. And the information I'll share with you tonight, I believe, demonstrates that. The key, though, is to make sure that you maintain balance. You need to make sure that your balance is spread across as many areas of the organization or as many areas of the effort as possible, because you don't want to over-focus on improving one thing to the neglect or the decline of another area. And it's also important to make sure that you are always looking to progress and refine and improve on the measures and the goals that you're reviewing. So that's really the purpose of what tonight is all about, is to show you the updates, but also make some recommendations on how we might tweak or refine some things. So our first goal is about student opportunities. This is the goal that's about our Trailhead project, our arts program, and our pre-K expansion that was underway a couple years ago. Notice, just for a couple updates, our Trailhead programs are flourishing in our elementary schools. We have a good solid base of how we're operating in that regard. it does not make any sense for us to continue to try to push for an August 2021 start to our high school options in Shrewsbury and Teignmouth. We don't have the budget scenario for that right now. We don't have the virus scenario for that right now. It just would not be appropriate. So you'll see in purple there, I'm recommending, and we can talk about this later on, I'm recommending a delay in that. Give us a couple more years to get those trailhead-based programs that are high school scenarios in the elementary schools. Give us a couple more years to get those in place. As we look at our arts programming, you know that in the budget that we are currently operating under, we had plans originally to put some pre-K through 12 arts coordination into effect and to have some dollars follow that. But in the fiscal crisis that we're walking into right now, we decided not to expend those dollars. I am pleased to let you know that we're still working on the leadership side of that. We're working with Kristen Simonetti, who's joined our leadership team and is sharing her expertise and knowledge, and we're going to be working to build out that arts leadership. So even though we're not spending the money right now, we still have the work in progress in that regard. So I'm really, really pleased with that. Our second goal is about student growth, and this is the one that kind of gets to a lot of the academic stuff. Really interesting stuff to share with you here. If we talk about the pandemic, we talk about schools being closed, and we talk about the concerns that we as adults tend to have for kids, one of the first concerns that comes to mind is students have to be in school in order for them to learn. We've all heard this remote learning isn't working, doesn't work, didn't work for my kid, it's a disaster. The challenge that I need to present to you with that regard is we don't have the data to support that. We don't have the data to support that our students have had a slide. We don't have the data to support that our students are suffering academically. The data that you're looking at here, which is our STAR 360 data for reading, this is our internal assessment that we administer 3 times per year to track how students are progressing through the curriculum and how they're meeting the standards at the end of the year that they're supposed to be meeting. These assessments are also tied to the Common Core standards that we are required to meet. What we're seeing is our students are right where we would expect them to be under normal circumstances. I'll repeat that for you again. Our kids are where we expect them to be under normal circumstances. The red data you see there, fall 2020, it's not appropriate to compare that to the spring numbers, but the spring numbers are really the target. That's really what we're looking at, because that is the end of year goal that we're shooting for students. So if you notice at some of our schools, we are already exceeding in fall of 2020, we're exceeding scores that we had in spring of 2019, which was our last clean testing date that we had. So I'm very optimistic about what this data represents for us. And again, this is for reading. I think it's appropriate to keep our targets in place to have our goal be by June of 2024 that we are at 85% proficiency in all of these assessments. And I believe we will get there, and I believe we'll make that progress. Same assessment, different focus area on math. You can see the numbers are slightly different, but still in a reasonable place for starting out a school year, even under normal circumstances. It's also worth mentioning that nationally, one thing that's being noted in the COVID context is math scores have tended to slip a little bit more than reading scores have. And the reason for that, if you just think about it logically, you think about remote work and how you tend to engage in a virtual type system. Much of that engagement may be literacy and reading based as opposed to math based. So you can kind of understand why there might be a little bit more of a math decline. But again, considering that we're looking at fall numbers in red that are manageable, the targets of meeting where we want to be at the end of the school year are completely within range, and we're actually pleased about that. As I continue with these goals, Tyler mentioned a little bit earlier that we just did PSAT testing with our juniors. You know that we have a goal to test all of our sophomores and juniors every year on the PSAT. We did not do sophomores this year because of COVID-related space dynamics. We just did the juniors. But really interesting progress. Note that the US average and the Vermont average from 2 school years ago to last year actually declined, while our Mill River average increased. That's the type of progress we want. Now we're slightly shy of our target. We were looking to increase 40 points annually, and we only increased 33 points. But as you all know, the point of a lofty goal is even if you work hard and don't get all the way there, you're still way farther ahead of where you started. So we are in a good place in terms of making that progress even in a pandemic year, we're looking to be in decent shape. And I'm really curious what our results will be when we get the 11th grade scores back for what was just taken. Going a little further, 2C is our goal that's about flexible pathways. So if you think that's advanced placement, dual enrollment, Stafford, internships, work studies, et cetera, I'd like to have some conversations with Tyler and Jen, particularly about what the appropriate target number is for that. We initially established a goal of 60% of our students having had flexible pathways experience. You notice in 18-19, it was 62%. Last school year, that number came out to 56%. Being really honest with you, I'm not sure what the ideal number is there. I have a feeling it may not be 60%. It may be lower than that when we think about how kids engage with school. But also when I think about the COVID context, when I think about what we've learned about remote learning and how some students thrive virtually and other students don't, we may find that more opportunities for flexible pathways open up to us, and more students are now willing to access those and be in atypical school environments. So I want to have those conversations and come up with a better recommendation for you on the target number there, but you can see we stayed in relatively the same ballpark. Going a little bit further, super pleased about graduation rate progress. You'll notice if you look specifically at our Mill River numbers, we had seen a decline 16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19. The 18, 19 year, we had a good handful of students that accessed finishing high school in different ways, whether that was pursuing a GED or going to Vermont Adult Learning. Some students did drop out of school, et cetera, but that 81.9% kept me up at night. That's not a number that I, by any means, was pleased with. I'm really satisfied to see a nice recovery for last school year, 1920, being at 97.6%. If you look at the overall US and Vermont averages, you can see, kind of hovering, let's just call it an average of 90. So if we can be where we want to be, which is 95 or above, and if we're running 97.5 right now, that's good progress. And that credit goes to our Mill River staff, our Mill River support staff, Tyler and Jen, the people who are working with our students to keep them engaged, keep them in school. And again, those 1920 numbers came on the back end of a pandemic, which was tough on some seniors, but those students gritted it out and got to the finish line, and we're really pleased with that. Social emotional goal, 2D, one of them focuses on out of school suspension and limiting that as a tool that we use. I'm pleased to say that those numbers overall were down. Keep in mind, we had to prorate that data, right? We were only in school 123 days as opposed to the 177 days. I'm talking about physically being in school. So had to translate some smaller numbers into what would it have been if we stretched that across the school year. So 18-19, we had 89 total out of school suspension days applied, prorated in 1920, only 66. You can see the number of students involved. It was 20 in 18-19, and prorated, it was 22, which is slightly higher on the student side, but less days overall. So good progress there. Obviously, we want to see both of those numbers decline and continue to decline over time as we utilize things like restorative practices, as we utilize every strategy we can to keep kids in school as opposed to just sending them home. Student attendance, we've seen some nice either stabilization or progress. You note that the district average went up 1 percentage point. Really pleased at Mill River. We went from 87% daily attendance to 92%. That is a solid gain to see in that area. Most of our elementary schools stayed pretty stable, kind of in the low to mid 90s range, but overall district percentage went up by 1 point. In the social emotional realm, the most unfortunate part of these goals is in the youth risk behavior survey realm. Because of the pandemic, data is not available to us from 2019. The state just has not made it available to us. And notice in purple, we just found this out today. The YRBS is normally issued in January. Because of the rules around that, it has to be administered in school, and there have to be a certain number of students taking it in order for the data to be valid. The state is delaying that administration until fall of 2021. So it will be a while before we have this measure as a resource to gauge progress in that realm. Len, I see your hand. Go ahead, sir.
Just a question, and it wasn't on the original one, but I think, saying that it's been delayed, I think that's important that we put it there because we say it's not available, but I think it's important for folks to understand why it's not available.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, Len, literally that came in today. So that's why the one I shared with you guys the other day, it didn't have it. I just typed it in for this evening. Thank you for that point. By the way, just a quick aside, it's worth you knowing on that last bullet point, the one related to student use of electronic vapor products. Our school district, along with about 20 other school districts in Vermont, we have decided to participate in a class action suit with school districts in California against the Juul manufacturers, Juul. What that has looked like is a little bit of workload for Tyler and I, but not bad. Essentially bringing up our policies around drugs and tobacco in school, looking at our discipline numbers, and when vaping first became an issue for us, there's a lot of legal work going into navigating that. For us, the determination was how much work are we talking about in order to participate, and our legal counsel suggested that it would be minimal work, but it could be worth it on the back end depending on how a settlement plays out. So we'll see what comes of that. Our third goal is our equity goal. Happy to say that we are on track or completed in these specific areas. I think we're going to need to revisit and decide what our next equity goals should be, but the first one is review policies as they pertain to educational equity. That just is an ongoing part of the work we do. And then establishing the educational equity policy, that is completed. That policy is on the books. Tonight, you're going to do a first reading to rescind your commitment to educational equity policy that was kind of the placeholder for our equity policy. And then, as you can see, we sought to have that adopted in June 2020. You adopted it in May of 2020. So good progress was made there. On the community side, this is work that is ahead of us, but also been accomplished. Congratulations to our community engagement committee. One of these goals was about developing a community engagement plan and being ready to tweak that as we need to, and that has been completed. That's in place. And then the next goal is about surveying our community and getting a baseline of how people feel about specific aspects of the schools that are spelled out for you there. The intention would be at the end of this school year to issue that first survey. We'll need to think about what that survey delivery model looks like. Is that on paper? Is that on electronic? Is it a combination of both? And what do we want the questions to look like? But that's work we can do this year to have ready for the conclusion of the school year. Goal 5 is our human resources goal. The first area of that is about employee retention. You can see slight improvement in employee retention. You can see the reasons why employees left. So the biggest difference last year was less resignations and one more termination overall, but a 1% increase in employee retention. You can see that our goal is 95 and we're at 89. So we do have a slight ways to go in that regard. The next goal in this regard is about new hired teachers, specifically remaining in employment for at least 4 years. I'm recommending that we change that to at least 80% because life does happen to people. And if there's a group of people who will tend to be a little bit more volatile in terms of moving on, it often can be those more newly hired teachers because life just changes and different opportunities arise. But looking at the data, you can see how that has progressed, how the retention number has looked for each of the past 4 years and the reasons why people have left when they have. Len, I see you have another question. Go ahead.
Sorry. It says percentage remaining, so I'm assuming that the 11 hired teachers in 2016-17, there are 8 remaining as of now.
Correct. You got it. And so that percent is basically 8 divided by 11, Len. That's where we got the 73 from.
My only question is, should we put something there where we say percentage remaining as of now?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
I got it. I couldn't. Again, you're talking math here, which takes Lenny a lot longer than anything else. And, I think it would help clarify that 73% of the teachers that we hired in 2016-17 are still there today.
Yeah, great point. I appreciate that, Len. Thank you. In terms of our teacher evaluation and mentoring program, Deborah Gardner-Bosch, who manages the mentoring system, gave us an update in that regard and talked about how mentoring has shifted in the virtual and remote realm, but we still have all of our connections with our new folks. They still have mentors, and we have structured experiences and support that they go through during the course of the school year. Even when you start the school year remotely and even in a volatile time like we're experiencing right now. Really pleased with some positive trends in daily teacher attendance rates. Target is for that to be at or above 95%. I'm really pleased that in 18-19, you'll see it was 90% district-wide. In 19-20, it was 95%. We hit that target, and you can see where some progress was made. Obviously, Jody doesn't ever let anybody be absent from school. That's where that 99% piece came up there. And if you're wondering what's the reason for selecting teachers as opposed to support staff, just thinking from the standpoint that we know that each teacher is directly engaged with students each day, and we can make that connection to student learning. Our support staff engage in a lot of other different types of actions depending on their role. So teachers felt like a more appropriate direct focus for that type of data. 5E and F is really about wellness and utilizing employee wellness as a tool to assist in retention and honestly employee satisfaction. I'm pleased that the board has already adopted an employee wellness policy. That is done. And I am comfortable saying, I think Adrian will be comfortable saying that we are currently in negotiations, but part of negotiations is we are talking about systems to support employee wellness that would be beneficial for the district and for employees, and generally make people pleased to engage in those types of activities. And so once we get negotiations done and wrapped up, we'll have some cool new updates in that regard, I certainly hope. And Adrian, I hope that was okay. Yeah, what I shared, how I shared that. Final goal is in the finance realm. Listen, I don't need to tell any of our board members this, but it's worth the community knowing this. We have a business office led by Stan that runs a tight ship. Our internal controls for how dollars move, how they're spent, and how they're monitored are solid. Our audits, when they come through, are clean, and usually we get suggestions for ways to tweak, and we don't get findings that are problematic or challenging. And I give all that credit to Stan. I know that, not just Stan, the folks that are working with Stan as well. I also give credit to our administrators and even our teachers and our administrative assistants in the schools. We don't spend money haphazardly. We are really critical about where our taxpayer dollars go. Our principals would probably tell you, if you ask them privately, that I'm pretty cheap. I don't just say spend, 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 or the end of the year is approaching, so let's spend it before it goes away. That's just not how we operate. We try to operate with respect for the fact that we're stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we want to use it well. And dollars we don't spend can be used for the future to bring down tax rates and those other types of things. And I'm honestly very proud of the way our board oversees us, the way we oversee our dollars, and the way that whole process works. But if you look at the goals that are related to finance, the audits are on track for what they should be. We will survey the public at the end of this year on public perception about finances. I cannot say enough about Gary Marcy and what he brings to the table for us from a strategic and planning standpoint with our facilities. You know, obviously in the COVID realm, we're not seeing as many efficiencies around heating because we're pumping fresh air into the buildings all the time. But you know as well as I do that we have good projects in place and good systems in place to perform the facilities work that needs to be done in a way that is respectful of dollars, but also gives us top-notch facilities in the realm that we're in. So we're really pleased with where we are overall. And if I were to talk globally about these goals, we are pleased with the progress that we've made, but we still have work to do. There are goals we haven't met. There are numbers that we want to continue to shoot for. It's not all about numbers. It's not all about test scores, but it's about saying, here's where we are, here's where we want to be. Let's make every decision align with the direction we want to go. And we believe we'll get there if we continue to operate that way. So I'll be quiet for a moment, and I would gladly take questions. And if you want to direct me to a specific goal, please feel free to.
I have a question, Dave. Going back to goal 2 and the test scores, you have fall 2020 and you don't have fall of 18 or 19. Would it be fair to say that fall scores are always lower than spring scores? Is that
yes?
Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, Tammy, I'm just trying to get there.
Yeah, just anyone looking at that, if you're comparing spring to fall, it looks like there could be a significant drop in some of those numbers, but the fall numbers are generally on track and correlate with previous fall numbers.
Absolutely correct. So those numbers are intended to increase as the school year goes along. The assessments are designed based on where students should be in the fall with acquisition of those skills and where they should be in the spring. And then we also test them in the wintertime. So lower numbers in fall are expected. So when you look at like Shrewsbury in the fall of 2020 already hitting where it was in the spring of 2019, like that's a big one, you know, because that shows that they're starting from where they left off in a previous year. But overall, those numbers are tracking right where they should be. Andrew or Brian, I know you're potentially with us still. Do either of you have anything to add to that assessment lens for the sake of the board? I think Andrew's trying to speak up.
There we go. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess the only thing I would say is the piece with regards to the spring versus fall. You know, we were talking about this today during our leadership team meeting that, you know, given everything that we experienced this past spring and where our numbers are at with the fall, I was very, very happy with where I'm seeing things at currently. And as Dave's and others have said already, I think we're in much better shape than we were expecting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And just to take that a little bit further, we do have winter assessments that we do as well to continue to track, and especially for our students who are at risk and that we are concerned about, you know, how they're performing. We have multiple data points that we check along the way. That's called progress monitoring, and we just keep ongoing track of where they are. And I guess I want to add one thing. I made the comment that we didn't see a negative impact like on our reading and math scores. And the other thing you hear about schools being closed to in-person instruction is the negative social emotional dynamics for students. That's commonly talked about in the public. And in no way do I seek to minimize that reality, because that is a reality for many of our students. It's a reality for many of our families, many of our staff members and employees. Like the social emotional dynamic of going through the pandemic, it's heavy on all of us. We're all tired of it. We all just want this to be over. And I've said this to the administrators today. In every one of your eyes that I'm looking at right now on the screen, I can see that you're tired, and so are the people out there who are watching us. So we're all in the same boat there. But when I talk to our administrators and when I'm in our schools, what I don't see is kids that look like they're having a difficult time. And when I ask administrators, how are kids doing? Right? Are you seeing more behavior? Are you seeing more breakdowns? Are you seeing students coming into school just not ready to handle this? The answer is no, it's the exact opposite, actually. And so there's one thing we have to be careful of as adults, is I think sometimes as adults, we project our own hangups and our own insecurities and difficulties. We project that onto the kids and we say the kids are feeling this way, when in reality, it's me. You know what I mean? And when in reality, it's what I'm feeling and the way I'm navigating life. That's not a fault that we do that. It's a human dynamic that we do that. But I can say from observation and from anecdotal evidence from our administrators that generally our kids are doing pretty well. And the whole world is dealing with the same thing. So that maybe makes it easier for everybody. When we do struggle, everybody tends to understand the struggle that we're all going through. So we'll keep watching our students. We'll stay tuned in with our counselors. We'll not let anybody slip through the cracks. But the social emotional piece seems to be going all right now. And that's a positive thing for us. Any other questions I can answer about any of the goals or anything else? Liz, I see you, followed by George and then Andy. So Liz, what do you have for me?
So I just have a thought. This is really for the principals, and this might be something our librarians would do, but I'm just wondering, in light of test scores, do our elementary schools do any parental outreach or literacy workshops? And I'm asking this knowing that the research shows that, you know, literacy begins at a very young age and it stays with a child through their developing years. So I'm just wondering if our schools, maybe through our librarians, do anything like that with the community to impress the importance of literacy on parents.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, I see Jody and Jen are unfortunate because I see both of their faces. So Jen, would you mind answering that question from a middle school, high school standpoint, and Jody from an elementary standpoint? Is there any light you can shed on Liz's question?
Well, our librarian does go around
in the school with like reading that she talks to the teachers and they makes book suggestions for independent reading based off of where they're at with these test scores. There has been a bunch of programs. I'm a reader. I'm sure you're aware of that one that have been done and utilized by teachers. We did send out all of our 7 through 12 parents the readout from Star 360 so they would know what was going on, and availability to talk to me at the high school level if they had to like dig into that at all. So that's kind of what's done, but not to the outreach like you're talking about with like getting parents involved with reading.
Thanks, Jen. Jody, how about you at the elementary level?
So I would say that we don't have a formalized program for like a literacy program in the evening, but we do integrate our parent community into our literacy programming in a number of ways. So if a kiddo is running a little bit behind where an average student would be at the elementary level, they are frequently recommended for EST educational support team. And EST always works to involve the parent in those conversations. And so those conversations run once a month. At Shrewsbury, usually a kid has a meeting about every 2 months to check in. We go over the student's data with the parent, with the I am there, special education staff, the school counselor, the classroom teachers, and our reading specialists, our interventionists are all there working with the parent. And at those meetings, frequently specific strategies, assistance, support, and materials are given to the parent so that we can provide home support. Another thing that we do is we work actually with our after school program to provide literacy support for those that are in after school, and our site director, Sarah Fry, is amazing at integrating it there. Our PTO is supportive of all of our educational programming, and we do push literacy into some of the programming that we do with PTO. And then we look to really invite parents to participate in our community, when there's not a giant pandemic going on, in ways that integrate them directly into the classroom through things like Four Winds, which integrates literacy with environmental education. And so in all of those ways, I feel like parents are very clued into what we're doing with kids. We send kids homes with leveled texts. And one bright spot of the pandemic is that our parents have been sitting right next to their learners for a good bit of the fall doing literacy instruction side by side. And so they're really getting this firsthand view. They're in the class. They spent 2 months in the classroom with their kids. You can't even imagine a program that would better help parents understand what we're doing.
Thanks, Jody. I hope that Liz answered your question for you. I believe we had George with a question followed by Andy, if I'm correct. George, what did you have for us?
Well, when you finished your presentation, which was well done, and thank you, you asked if there was any questions about the presentation, and then you made the mistake of saying, and anything else. So I have an anything else question. And it's quite simple, I guess. Are we the only district that is involved in the particular method of operation that we're doing through the pandemic with students in and out, remote learning and all of that?
No, sir. So to answer that question specifically, we started the school year remotely for everyone, obviously, as you know, with the exception of special needs students who wanted to access services. And there were a handful of other districts throughout the state that made that same early decision. We obviously are serving our kids in person now. We are serving our pre-K through 6 students 5 days per week in person, which is actually more than most of the elementary schools throughout the state are doing. Many of them are on kind of a 4-day a week or sometimes even a 3-day a week type of rotation. And our 2 days in, 3 days out rotation that we have at the high school level, just for clarity, the reason why we need to do that is because the health guidelines we have to follow limit the number of bodies we can have in the building based on the space available and keeping social distancing, which we know is the key to controlling virus spread. The overwhelming majority of middle school, high schools across the state are on a similar 2 in, 3 out type of scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, I know you had a question for me.
There, yes.
Thank you. No, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I greatly appreciate this this update of the 5-year plan. I appreciate that it's very specific, that it has very specific goals, and most importantly, it has the data to track where we are. I have been through many years of idle conversation and talk and generalities of where we should be and where we want to go. It is so refreshing to see this, that it's very detailed and shows us exactly what we have to do to continue or where we have succeeded. So thanks very much, and I look forward to much more of it.
Thank you, Andy. We appreciate that feedback, because for the folks doing the work, it's good to know that it's hitting where it needs to. So thanks. Anything else on this topic?
Doesn't appear so. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate it. So I guess we'll continue on, and you're going to give us an update on, I like the way we've worded it, lay of the land regarding remote learning. So
Yes. So thanks for the time. And again, I apologize. You've got several agenda items that are me blabbing at you a lot. So I guess I would like to start by giving you the context that I am observing statewide. A little bit of this will be opinion, but it's very informed opinion. And then I'd like to take it further and have a conversation with you and hear from you as board members, kind of what your thoughts are in the moment based on where we are. So first, I want to give you the statewide context that I am hearing across the state. You know that I engage with my superintendent colleagues across the state multiple times per week. I engage with Secretary French at least 2, often 3 or 4 times per week, and am just have a decent read on what's going on. What I'm seeing and hearing from superintendents are concerns. There are some districts out there that have already made decisions to go into remote learning modes based around the holidays. Some of those decisions are for different reasons. Some have been preemptive based on concerns about the virus. Others have been reactive based on the real or perceived lack of availability of staff due to the potential for travel during the holiday seasons. Others are due to HVAC types of reasons. You know, if you look at Burlington High School, or if you look at Leland and Gray, if any of you know where Leland and Gray is, there are some schools that are not open because there are, you know, some structural and facility based issues. What we're seeing is the governor and state government taking a new tone with Vermonters. You know, what started as an encouraging vibe in March and April, encouraging people to make good decisions, has now turned to a scolding vibe. If any of you have watched the most recent press conferences, they're pretty direct, they're relatively harsh, and there's a fair deal of kind of virtual finger wagging that goes on, and pointing at adults making bad decisions as being the cause for the pandemic resurging in the way that it is in Vermont. I think many of us have believed all along that in Vermont, we've been blessed by our geography, we've been blessed by our social distance that's kind of built into the culture here, and we were able to avoid a lot of the early things, but folks wondered when it would come around and start resurging, as it has been. As you all know, travel has been entirely restricted. There's no travel that any of us can make out of state without quarantine anymore. The concerns that superintendents are expressing are that school operations will fall apart first due to lack of availability of staff, as opposed to falling apart because of a whole bunch of people in the school being sick. So let me give you an example. You probably know that there was a case identified either late yesterday or today in Rutland at Northwest Primary, and it won't shock you to know that we have connections to that case. And so the complexity of how the web of a positive case and then required quarantines for family members, for people who interact with, et cetera, that web becomes very, very complicated very, very quickly. What we've been seeing locally, when Brian spoke earlier about our health services staff and how much work they're doing, staying in touch with families about our kids who are homesick and what's going on, is we feel the virus squeezing in on us. It is not in our schools yet, but I sincerely believe we're a couple days away from it, where we will be getting the call from the health department that we have a positive case. When that happens, we provide them all the information they need. They do the contact tracing. They inform us who needs to be quarantined. And then we have to make decisions about, does a classroom close? Does a school close? What's your duration, et cetera? There's a lot that happens once those cases come in. Superintendents statewide are struggling with, do you preemptively try to prevent sickness and prevent lack of staff availability, forcing you to not have a school open? Or do you wait for those dominoes just to fall? I'll be really honest with you. For me and my own personal decision making, it's a decision I have to make as to, whether or not we are in person or remote. I am stuck for the moment in that limbo of, do we do something proactively, or do we just wait for things to essentially fall apart and the house of cards that we've built to crumble down? Just to let you know, I did a survey internally within our leadership team, just asked the question of, should we proactively be thinking about this? And I got basically 2 to 1. The 2 said definitely, and the 1 said probably. Strong sentiment in that regard in terms of how our internal leaders feel we need to be thinking. You saw a message that I sent to the community late last week, because late last week felt exactly like March 13th to me, and it was November 13th. It feels like it's in the wind again, and it feels like we're in a place where things could move quickly. And I'm very sensitive if this happens because of our own decision making or because decisions made for us. I want families in particular to be thinking ahead and starting to get things in order in case there are childcare challenges, which is one of the biggest impacts when we do make a decision to deliver instruction remotely. So with all that, there are a lot of gears moving on a daily basis, and I have to take all the information in that I can in order to try to make good decisions around what's the safest and most strategic move for us as a district. I've made no decisions as of yet, but I'm contemplating what the realities are. As board members, I'd love to hear from any of you that are willing to share in this forum. If you have opinions on this, what for you would be the triggers that would justify different types of moves? How do you feel right now about our schools being open as they are with the circumstances that are out there? I think we can all agree that in-person is the goal and it's valued, and we want to do it as long as we possibly can. But do you have a threshold where your thinking on that or your perspective starts to change? I'd love to just hear from any of you that have some thoughts that you'd like to share or talk about. Tammy, do you want me to? You want to lead that conversation, or you want me to, or what's your preference?
You could lead. It's easier than not interrupting you.
Yeah, you bet. So I see George's hand. George, what do you have for us?
Well, both my wife and I are a high risk situation, and I, to make my wife happy, make sure I have a mask on everywhere I move and go. But I am still running into many folks that are scoffing at the idea of you need to wear a mask, and in areas where people are gathered together. And that being the case, and we're starting to see an increase in cases of infection, I am of the opinion you need to be as cautious as you can, and would lean quickly towards the remote learning. And I'm not sure what would promote it for you, but to me, if you even have the one case or indication of a possible one case, might be time to take some steps. That's it.
George, I appreciate that perspective. Thanks for just letting me know where you are. That's the type of feedback that is helpful to me coming from you. BJ, I see your hand. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that I think the students are safest when they're in our school system, and as long as we have good protocols in place, I think their bubble of who they're interacting with is smaller than if they're at home and and parents start having to deal with, where do I send my kids without the economy being closed? So I'm on the fence. I'm actually strongly say, if at all possible, keep the kids in school. And I really think that is the safest place for them. And I also I don't think, I can actually agree with Brooke in her Vermont Digger article that she wrote about closing schools preemptively kind of encourages the travel that our state doesn't even want us to do. So I don't think that's a good message either. So those are my two things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, BJ. Thank you for sharing that. And for any of you who might ask, hey, Dave, have you asked our staff and parents, of their travel plans? I have not. Frankly, that's not a question that I wish to ask of our parents and families. You've seen my communication has been along the lines of, listen, the decisions we all make as individuals and as families can affect our ability to have school and your ability to potentially access school. So that's been the approach that I've chosen to take. However, on the flip side, Two Rivers to our east asked parents and staff that question, and they heard results that caused them to say, we're not going to be able to operate schools because of the number of people who plan to go do things that we've been asked not to do. So that was a fueling factor for our neighbors directly to the east, just for context for you. Any other feedback? Adrian, I see your hand. You're on mute though, Adrian.
It doesn't help, does it? I've been wavering back a lot, back and forth, and I totally get the idea of wanting to stay as safe as possible. I also totally understand the angst that families, even hearing that we're talking about going remote, are feeling. I'm hoping we stay open, without any signs of illness through Thanksgiving, and maybe put the word out. Hey, this is the vacation, and the holiday where the rubber meets the road. If you want school to stay open, act appropriately. Wear masks. Don't go to, grandma and grandpa's house with all the cousins. Behave smartly, and maybe school will be able to stay open. And if, the week after Thanksgiving happens and everybody has behaved appropriately and we can stay open, that would be great. But if after Thanksgiving we see signs of illness creeping into the community on a far greater level, then I think, people have spoken. They don't care enough to be careful. I would sincerely hope that that's not the case, because I know people value having their children in school. But I think we need to be really clear that it's our behavior that will allow that to happen.
Got it. I appreciate that perspective, Adrian. Thank you. Maria, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. I think it's partly people making the choice to travel, and that's a personal choice. But another concern is students that are coming home at Thanksgiving from colleges, and that's something that not everyone has space for them to quarantine during that when they come back. Some of them are coming back and staying. Some of them are coming back and going away again. At the same time, I agree with BJ that our kids are safe in school until we have like a documented contact that's concerning. And the benefit of having started out remotely is that they know how to do it and their teachers know how to do it. Like, it's not ideal, but it's not something that's going to be this traumatic change like it potentially was in the springtime. So I think the longer that we can keep kids in school, the better it is. I'm also I am concerned about how it's working out for the high school students, because having them not specifically accountable or not very accountable on the days that they're not in person, I know from personal experience and from talking to fellow parents that their students are having a hard time staying motivated and staying connected. And I know that we're concerned about space and we're concerned about safety, but I just think we should keep working on that.
I appreciate that, Maria. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Does anybody else have thoughts? Yeah, John, what can you share?
So I hope this stays. I'm having audio difficulties. I keep having to drop out of the meeting and join back in, or else I lose audio. But first, a question: what's our mask compliance look like? Are the vast majority of people wearing their masks and wearing them appropriately? Or do we have a lot of people with masks down here or taking them off when they shouldn't? What are we seeing in the schools?
You're talking in the school setting, John?
Yes.
We have really high compliance, and that's because they know that I won't tolerate anything less than that. I've been pretty painfully specific about that. A handful of students early on at the high school level wanted to test that and found out very quickly what happens when you test that, and the answer is you can't be here. That's the level of compliance that we're looking for. You know, we do see there are adults that when they talk, their masks migrate down their faces, and we always have to remind ourselves about making sure that we're modeling good things for students. But just in my meanderings around Mill River in particular, I can't even think of a scenario where I've seen a student not properly wearing a mask in a setting where they're expected to. So feel pretty good about that, generally speaking. Adults, a different story. You know, we have adults who drop kids off in the morning who refuse to wear masks and flaunt it and yell at our staff when our staff asks them to wear a mask. We have an adult at one school who gets out of his car maskless and intentionally waves at people to unnerve community members, and we receive complaints from those community members about that individual. So like I said earlier, sometimes we project our issues onto kids, and I would suggest that adult behavior right now is more of a problem for us than kid behavior, and that's unfortunate.
So given that, my comments here may surprise a lot of people. Looking at the information that's coming from the governor of Vermont and also other states, where it appears that the majority of cases, 70-something% in Vermont, and I think the numbers are pretty consistent in other states, are coming from small gatherings where people are letting their guard down. They're not wearing masks when they're getting together with family members. They're not wearing masks when they're socializing. They're not social distancing. Those are the things that are driving the increase in cases, I think, across the country. And given that information, and I think that's really what has driven the governor to do what he has done and to not do this time around some of the things that were done early on. Given all that, I think I actually agree with BJ in my thought that the kids are at least as safe at school, if not safer at school, with a good mask compliance rate with our adults and our other students, our other learners, than they would be potentially at home or out in the community. So I think we ride it out as long as we can continue to keep sanitizing and keep people washing their hands and wearing their masks. I think we ride this out as long as we possibly can and keep the kids in the schools. I know that probably surprises a lot of people, but that's my opinion given where I've been previously. But now that more of the data is out there and is, sort of, it matches what I think all of us have seen at one point or another in our own lives with folks who are less than compliant with mask use. It just makes a lot of sense. And the CDC is now saying mask use can protect both directions, which they had only been saying was protecting you from me if I'm wearing a mask. Now it's also saying it's protecting me from you as well. So I think I'm comfortable with the kids staying in the school.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you. I think I saw Liz's hand. Go ahead, Liz.
So I want to clarify what it is that you're looking for insight around. Is it closing schools ahead of Thanksgiving because of a staff shortage of people who may be quarantining ahead of travel? And or is it preemptive because of people who may travel over Thanksgiving and then return?
Yeah, so I'm not asking for that specific of feedback at all. So let me reframe kind of the context of my ask. The context is everything around us is escalating. The press conference yesterday, Dr. Levine said that Vermont's reproduction rate of the virus is ranked number 2 in the country, which means that we're right behind Maine, as if one of us gets sick, we infect more people than 48 other states in the country. So we've got this reality of it's taking hold and it's spreading. You know that there are major cases in Washington County, Chittenden County, et cetera, but all of the counties in Vermont are escalating and climbing. We know that there will be people around the holidays who do not comply with the directions to not travel. We know that there will be people who do not comply with the directions to not meet with family members for the holidays outside of your specific household. And we know that when there are positive cases that emerge, there will be a tangled web of quarantine and lack of availability of kids and adults that could make it impossible for our schools to open. We also anticipate, we're doing the COVID testing of our staff tomorrow. Let's be honest, you know, we have 200 employees. I don't know how many people are signed up. Let's guess that 100 are. I won't be shocked if a couple people show up with positives from those tests. It could be out there and we don't even realize it, and
Right.
what that triggers for us in terms of how we do things. So what's helpful to me, Liz, is I'm trying to sort out all that information, because ultimately I need to say, okay, here's what we need to do. It's helpful to me right now to know where you folks stand just on the concept of how long is it appropriate for us to keep doing in person, and when's the appropriate switch to flip into remote. Your varied perspectives, we've heard different perspectives from everybody, some aligning, some not. It helps me to make sense out of things, and candidly, it helps me to make a decision when the time comes.
Okay, so then in keeping with what John said and what BJ said, my understanding of transmission trends from, you know, based on what the governor is saying and what I'm reading, is that schools are not venues of spreading, because we have, you know, we have rules and regulations, and we're mitigating this well, that the areas that are problematic are restaurants and bars and socializing adults. So I am for keeping schools open. I do worry about, you know, families who are moving forward with Thanksgiving and travel. You know, it's critical that they follow quarantining protocol and procedures to protect the rest of us. So my concern would be after the holidays, but my understanding is that what we're doing right now is working. And so I think, you know, again, ahead of Thanksgiving, I'm comfortable leaving things as they are.
Appreciate that, Liz. Thank you. Thank you very much. Got a couple other folks that I'm wondering if you have perspective. I'm trying to think. Len, Amy, I'm just going through the visuals. Andy, anybody have thoughts you want to share on this topic? Andy, what do you have? Oh, no, Andy, you spoke already, didn't you? No,
Nope.
I'm sorry.
Nope. There we go. No, I spoke about the 5-year plan.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm in agreement with most everybody that school is the safest place. That's what the data shows. Let's keep the kids in. We have lots of experience at remote learning, and we can literally, because of that, make a switch quite quickly. And one of the things you emphasized at the beginning of the year was the faculty were told to be prepared, have their work prepared to switch at any moment. So we should be able to do that, turn on a dime. Yes, we don't know what the parents are going to do, and they are the big factor, but let's, at the moment, let's move forward with keeping students in school.
All right, appreciate that. Appreciate that. Len or Amy, any opinions to share? Len, go ahead.
Yeah, as a person who originally was very much in favor of the remote learning at the beginning of the school year, I think now that we're open and doing in person, I think we need to try to maintain that as long as we can. I subbed over Fairhaven the other day, and it's amazing. It was amazing to me to see the kids wearing masks with no issues whatsoever, and the adults wearing masks with no issues whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I'm sure it's the same in Mill River. The custodians cleaning the hallways, cleaning the banisters and the stairways, and doing all of that. And I'm kind of looking around going, wow, this is impressive. And as I say, I'm sure that's reflective of Mill River as well. I was amazed, to be honest. I was surprised. So I think as long as we maintain the protocols that we have at the schools, I think we are safer there, and kids are safer there.
Appreciate that, and appreciate you've got an inside the school perspective. So thank you for that. Now, I'm also interested in our healthcare expert on the board. What are your thoughts, Amy? What are you willing to share with us?
Hi, Dave. I thought you were going to call on me first. It was nice to hear everyone's perspective before speaking. I haven't had a lot of capacity or space to really think about decision making for the school. Doing a lot of decision making at work with regards to COVID and really kind of at capacity. I really want to echo Adrian's sentiment that what happens over the next couple weeks is all about what our community does. I think that district has done an incredible job of keeping staff and students safe. I can tell you from my own experience, I know that universal masking has an incredible impact, and so really important, and we've heard a lot of that tonight. You have to wear a mask. It's really the best thing that you can do to keep yourself and other people safe. I am very worried about what's going to happen after the Thanksgiving holiday. Like Maria said, I'm worried about students coming back home. I'm worried about people not abiding by the governor's order, which is to not celebrate Thanksgiving outside of your own household. We've seen, the increase in cases coming from Halloween parties. And we kind of know what the impact was from that, from sporting events. I believe there was a bowling league. So we really have had a chance to see how those types of activities impact our community and our state. And I think we should learn from that. And I just want to really ask everybody in the community, do your part, stay at home, wear your mask, and we're going to have to see what happens. But Dave, I'm confident that you and the leaders will make the right decision when the time comes. I've seen that. It's been very evident over the past 8 months, and I want to thank you for all the work that you've done. Does
Thanks,
anybody
Amy.
have any questions? Okay. Thank
Amy,
you.
I appreciate that, and we appreciate that in terms of our leadership team. Doug, I thought I lost you for a minute, but I see you again. Do you have any thoughts on this that you'd like to share?
Let me get you back on. I got a little bit of a easier thing than a lot of them have. I have my blood is an O negative, and they're telling us that this type of thing is a lot easier to get away from if you're an O negative. So I'm hoping that's going to be better. I think I went through it, plus my wife and my daughter in January. So that's a little bit of an immunity. And I spend most of my life outside, which is, by the way, I got to get going. I got to know he called. In a house with, I think, 2 kids, but more importantly, 10 very adorable 10-day-old black lab puppies. I got to get some meat on for them. I'm going to freeze them. But yeah, it's so hard to tell because there's so many ways that you can say kids are safer in school, but then again, we have schools that are bringing the kids in and they're getting sick. The high schools and the colleges more. It's just whatever you're comfortable with for the most part. I think schools need to be real careful with that because once you get one situation and moves around the kids, if it's 4 days before you realize that somebody is contagious, they've come in contact with a lot of people, and then each of those people have contacted other people, so it's going to bounce right up there. I did check into my economic things when I went over the pay orders and stuff, and I was interested in one entry. It was one on top of the other. The one on the lower part was electric bill for Shrewsbury Mountain School, the amount of $21 for the course of the month. The one right above it was another school, and I'm not sure who it was. That amount evidently didn't have solar panels. It was $220 some odd dollars. So I'm looking at 6 times more without the panels. Just hope we can get the rest of the houses built. Tonight's executive session that you have coming up, keep in mind that I'm in with a majority of the board members, and you others will hear what's going to be discussed. So thank you very much, and good luck. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Take care,
Thank you, Doug. We appreciate that. So listen, I'll try to encapsulate what I've heard. I've heard, generally speaking, we all value having the kids in person, and as a group, I'm not saying you have a common board statement, but the general trend is let's keep kids in as long as we safely can do so. Making sure that parents understand, like, hey, the way we behave and approach the coming weeks as a community will totally impact what our options are that are available to us as we move forward, and really just need to keep watching the circumstances and watch how things unfold. I think we all realize that a lack of availability of staff or a growing case count, if and when there is one, both become circumstances where some faster decisions might need to be made. So giving people a heads up that it could always be just a couple days away is probably the most important message at this point in time. But you've been really helpful, so I appreciate that very, very much. If any of you have other thoughts later that cross your mind, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on that. I'd be happy to listen. So I think that's it for that one, Tammy.
Yes, and we'll move on to number 9, which we received, or I received a request to have this put on the agenda with regard to a decision David made as the superintendent with regard to elementary sports proceeding during the time of this pandemic. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you to give some background on that decision and why you made it, and then we can have a discussion.
Yeah, you bet. So first, background. So from conversations that we had throughout the spring and into the summer as we were contemplating how the school year was going to be opening, that I was looking very closely at a remote start for us, and obviously that's the decision that was made. We also knew during the summer, we doubted that many fall sports would be able to occur at all, and there was extreme doubt that any winter sports would be able to occur. That information was coming from some reliable sources that I'll explain momentarily. But when making the decision about how we were going to begin the school year, one early decision that made sense was that we would not engage in trying to prop up our elementary sports programs for this particular school year. As you know, Mill River sports are overseen by an athletic director. They're well funded, they're well supervised, they're well trained, and our elementary sports are a little bit looser in terms of structure. We have variable programs. We've got a district-wide cheerleading program, and we have a soccer program that is rooted out of Clarendon Elementary, and then we've got some basketball programs in a few of our schools. But the decision in July to just say we're not going to go down that road, that aligned with other decisions we made, like there wouldn't be any out-of-district field trips this year to make sure we were in compliance with the health guidelines. And we knew that we would have struggles this year with keeping gyms clean, making sure that schools were sanitized, managing the reality that we're not allowed to have visitors in the schools, especially during the after-hours time frame. There were just a lot of things that made that a logical choice. If I translate to middle school and high school sports, so I actually sit on the committee, the statewide committee that has formulated the guidance for middle school and high school sports. So when it comes to those details, I know them innately because I've been involved for about 6 months in working on them. That committee consists of me as the sole superintendent. The president of the VPA, who's the principal at Leland and Gray, is also on the committee. There are 3 athletic directors from across the state. The secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources facilitates the committee. There is an athletic trainer from Middlebury who participates on the committee, and then 2 infectious disease pediatricians out of UVM, Dr. Raska and Dr. Lee. You may have heard those names if you're following any of the epidemic-related stuff that goes on in the state. We've probably met 30 times between July and last week working on developing the guidance for each sports season and kind of doing the political back and forth between the governor's folks and what they've been looking for from a sports standpoint and what the practitioners in the field believed was appropriate. I will be very candid with you. I have no problem saying this publicly. Within that committee, an overwhelming majority of the folks on the committee thought that no indoor sports during the wintertime should occur. I'll repeat that. The majority felt that no indoor sports during the wintertime should occur. However, there was political pressure, in some ways linked to the recreational programs, which have now been suspended and are not even occurring. The fact that they already had programs in place created some pressure where we were instructed to go ahead and find a way to have things like hockey and basketball occurring. Those were allowed to occur without any spectators whatsoever. They had to occur under very tight parameters. And I will tell you candidly that superintendents all over the state are up in arms about the fact that it's even being allowed. And superintendents are contemplating decisions on a regional and statewide basis about whether or not we will allow those sports to occur anyway, because ultimately that is the superintendent's decision whether or not a sports season goes on. So as it relates to our elementary programs, the question of should we be doing it because high schools are allowed to do it? My response to that is absolutely not. And there are a number of reasons. We don't feel great about high school indoor sports happening. We are going to have a very difficult time keeping the Mill River gyms sanitized and cleaned and maintained and take care of those spaces. We have to limit the number of people that can access that because we've got to keep the COVID realities down. To try to replicate at the elementary level, to hold elementary coaches accountable and provide the oversight on site that we would need to make sure that things were happening, to clean the buildings in the after hours time frame after a practice or a game might occur, would be absolutely impossible and would potentially break us in terms of the availability of our custodial staff and the resources that we've got. So if you asked me to make the decision again, with current facts about having elementary sports and particularly having basketball, which was the request that came to you, I would say more emphatically that we should not have elementary sports this year, and we should not have elementary basketball occurring this year. And I think it's still debatable whether high school basketball will be allowed to occur. The reason I share that is the trends statewide in terms of the positivity rate are trending in a very bad direction. What happens when they trend in a bad direction is we get moved from step 3, which is what allows us to have competitions and allows us to use our gyms for things like basketball. We get moved to step 2. I would not be shocked if we are moved to step 2 this Friday, announced at the governor's press conference. That would not shock me at all. If we get moved to step 2, we can't even use the gyms for those purposes anymore. So the concept of starting basketball practices on November 30th kind of becomes a moot point when you can't use the gyms for basketball purposes. So if the board wishes to discuss it, I'd answer any questions you may have. But if you were seeking to make a judgment to either support a decision that's already in place, you could make a motion that way, or you could just hear what I've had to share, have some questions answered, and decide to proceed, accordingly. I'll pause and allow you to do what you need to do.
Yeah, so the specific request that I think we all received, I think everyone received it, right? Yes.
I believe so.
Was to have the board overrule the superintendent's decision. So I'd be willing to have some discussion on that. I don't know if anyone wanted to make that motion or if you just want to have a general discussion so that the public can hear where we're at and understand. So George.
I would move that we abide by the superintendent's decision in this matter.
Thank you, George. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Adrian. Any discussion? Does anyone want to specifically speak to that? John.
Dave, I'm curious. I don't remember what the timeline was originally for the start of practices and games. Can you just review that really quickly?
Yeah, you bet, John. Thanks for asking. So the guidance that was issued allows practices to begin November 30th, which is the Monday immediately following Thanksgiving, and allows games to begin January 11th. I have had some preliminary conversation with Kim Maneri, who already has planned, if basketball does occur, that practices would not begin before December 7th, because we think it's wise to have a little bit of buffer post-Thanksgiving because of the concept of a 14-day window. I'm contemplating and talking with my colleagues, if this occurs, do we potentially push that back further? Do we say, hey, no practices until maybe January 11th, 2 weeks after New Year's, and maybe games early February? We're contemplating what would be the things, if we do it, that would be the safest move from a potential travel virus standpoint, et cetera. But right now, November 30th, January 11th are the dates.
And I know that the multipurpose room or the middle school gym is sort of one of the most self-contained spaces at the high school. Has there been consideration for trying to have like one elementary school basketball team and have them use just that one space?
That has been looked at, and the challenge that we face, John, is again one of supervision and one of, candidly, and Gary would support this, custodial support to make it happen. Our custodial ranks are spread so incredibly thin, making sure that we're dealing with the academic dynamic of what goes into the school day and dealing with keeping one gym clean to add another, I don't know what the square footage is in there, but add another space of that size would break us from a staffing standpoint. And that's a real problem for us. I don't know if Gary wants to add anything in that regard.
Yeah, and it's not just the gym either. It's going to be the locker rooms and everything else. So I think that, coupled with what we've just been hearing from the governor, where if we do end up with people not complying with the directives over Thanksgiving, the people that may get infected at Thanksgiving may not be showing, in all likelihood, will not be showing symptoms by the November 30th date. So I would, at the very least, if we're going to do anything, strongly encourage that we wait at least 2 weeks past Thanksgiving before we even entertain the idea of anything happening at any level, high school or middle school or elementary school. But I think, people were in the fall were questioning soccer, which is probably less of a contact sport. It is still a contact sport, but less of one than basketball is. And people were questioning the advisability of playing soccer. What the guidance was around football was pretty straightforward. They were trying to minimize contact. So, I guess my opinion is that I think we need to stay away from elementary school sports just because of the logistics of trying to keep the spaces clean, and even look at pushing off anything with the high school until we get through Thanksgiving and through the incubation period around the Thanksgiving holidays. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, John. Thanks.
Adrian.
I want to agree with John. I think that's very reasonable, and I think we need to concentrate on the fact that we're getting our kids into school because we want them to have some social time and to be able to have in-person instruction, and the academics are really important. We don't want them to fall behind, and we have to keep that our priority. I mean, I'm a strong proponent of sports, elementary level, high school level. This is not the year. I mean, I fully support not moving forward with this.
Thank you. Len.
Yeah, just a comment. I agree with both John and Adrian. And also, if you talk to basketball coaches, they don't want to start practice November 30th and not have a game until January sometime. So a couple of coaches that I've spoken with are saying they're not going to start November 30th, even though they can. Because again, if anybody's coached, and John, I'm sure you understand this, at some point the drills get a little old. And when you're in a gym inside and you're doing the same stuff all the time, as I say, I've talked to a couple of coaches and they just said, no way, we're starting November 30th. I'm not going to start until into December. So I think there's a movement there to put that off even.
Okay. Anyone else, or shall we vote on the question? BJ, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree that we shouldn't have it, but I'm going to put it on the spin of without a centralized leadership at the elementary school level, like we have with Kim at the high school level. I think putting that on the coaches and the various principals is a strain this year, especially this year. Just because we need that one person to know the rules and to hold everybody accountable so that coaches can coach when they want to coach. And so that's my reasoning for support of not having the elementary school sports this year. I think it's a shame, but that's my reasoning. Okay.
Thank you, BJ. Okay. So I will ask for a vote. All those in support of George's motion to support the superintendent's decision with regard to the sports program, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed to that, please say no. Hearing none. Any abstentions? We're unanimous. There you go, Dave.
Thanks, folks. I appreciate the conversation and the decision. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to committee business. So first, Len, we have personnel.
Yes, we do. We have a couple of requests for board action tonight. I'll make a motion that we approve a contract for Michelle Hoffman, a 1.0 full-time equivalency school counselor at Mill River Union High School with an IEP focus.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the contract for Michelle Hoffman, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? It's unanimous, and we welcome Michelle to the Mill River family.
Number two, I'd like to make a I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract, a contract for Carolyn Gregory, a 1.0 full-time equivalency general education para educator at Mill River Union High School. And she is supervising a classroom due to required remote assignment for the teacher.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the contract for Carolyn Gregory, thumbs up. Anyone opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? Hearing none. Congratulations to Carolyn for joining the Mill River family.
Also, just to note, current postings that are out there, Mill River Union varsity girls and boys basketball coaches. Those positions are available. Interesting. Also, bus driver, which may be shocking, but nonetheless. And also looking for a general education paraeducator at Wallingford Elementary School. So those are three current postings. The other thing I'd like to mention is we met a while ago. Maria and I met with David around his evaluation. And at the personnel committee this evening, it was decided that we're at the point where that evaluation needs to go to all of the board members. So I just want to give all of the board members a heads up that I will be sending you within the next couple of days the evaluation that was done for David. And that if you have any questions, you need to feel free to contact me or Maria with any of those questions. We spent quite a bit of time, talked with a lot of people. It was a lengthy process, much lengthier than we thought it would be given everything else that was going on. But what the personnel committee feels is that all of the board members need to see that evaluation. And then at our next meeting, which is December 4th, at the next board meeting, December 4th, folks would be prepared to go into executive session to discuss any questions or issues that they have around David's evaluation and eventually looking at approving that evaluation and moving on from that. So I just wanted to let the board members know you should be seeing that in the next couple of days. And as I said, if you have any questions at all, please let me or Maria know, and we'll be glad to do that. So the personnel committee meeting next meets December 4th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Len. BJ, we'll move on to policy.
Okay. John, did you have something you were trying to say? I saw two fingers up.
No.
December 2nd, not 4th.
Oh.
December 2nd.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks, John. Sorry.
Okay, so first thing on the agenda is to rescind policy F12, commitment to educational equity. And
That's just a first reading though, PJ, not a rescindment vote yet.
The equity one?
Yeah, we need to warn that for rescindment, so you guys would approach it as a first reading tonight.
Okay, so first reading for rescindment is F12, commitment to equity, educational equity. And the reason why that is being rescinded is we have an actual equity policy that has been passed. So I'd like to make a motion to that regard, to rescind, to what's the wording again?
First reading.
First reading. Yeah, first reading of F12 for rescindment.
I would second the first reading to for the equity.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving F12 for first reading for rescindment, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed, please say no. And anyone abstaining, let me know. Okay. Thank you. Oh, George is going to abstain. Yes, George?
No, I just wanted to suggest to help BJ out that the idea is that you're seeking approval for the first reading in your motion.
Approval for first reading.
Yep.
Thank you, George.
And I think that is actually my first reading as a chair. So
yeah, yes, it is.
Congratulations, BJ. Big night. Big night.
And on to the second one. We have the flag policy, which I'm going to start off by making a motion for the flag policy G17 for a first reading. So that's approval for a first reading of G17, the flagpole policy.
Is there a second?
I will second for purposes of discussion.
Thank you, George. And is there discussion? Len?
Yep. And I'm going to read this, and I'll go quickly. On July 23rd, 2020, the board received an email from a community member who was the parent of two children that attended Mill River. The parent described the harassing conditions her children faced in 2016. Her children would not be members of a marginalized group, yet the physical, emotional, and psychological pain they experienced was very real. A flag on a pole would not have improved the situation. It is what takes place inside the walls of our schools that needs to be addressed. We need to encourage our students to express their opinions. Our teachers and administrators need to do everything in their power to ensure that all students feel safe, secure, and included. We need to provide students with opportunities to exercise their right to freedom of speech. This is about our students and tomorrow's adults. Our job is to provide the best educational opportunities for every individual who walks the halls of this district schools. If you think this whole flag process is not political, I would invite you to reflect upon what has transpired since July. Our discussions have divided our communities that we serve. We need to consider the ramifications of decisions we make more thoroughly. So once again, I will vote against this policy.
Thank you, Len. Any other discussion? BJ?
Yeah, I gotta admit, the first time I said I was in support of a flag on the pole, it was because it opens up the discussions. It opens up discussions in the classrooms. It opens up discussions in the community. And that happened. And for that regard, I am absolutely excited that what we did transpired the way it did. My daughters are talking about it. And this policy, I'm gonna have to admit my personal opinion has changed about what I would agree to going on a flagpole. However, I think this policy does a good job of at least opening up options should they arise. And I think separating the political flags that we have talked about in the past from this policy, I really think this is a good policy to have on the books. And I think it's going to open up conversations down the line that we can have that may or may not put a flag on the pole. So and that's why I'm supporting of this policy.
Thank you, BJ. George. Oh, sorry. Can I let John go? He was first, and then
Sure.
I'll come back to you. Sorry, John.
So a lot of work went into crafting this policy, a lot of discussion, and even though I wasn't on the policy committee, I was there for all of it. I think a lot of thought went into it, and we've had our legal counsel look at it a couple different times, and he is fairly confident that it will withstand challenges. That doesn't mean that we won't have to face them, but there's a fair amount of confidence that the policy will stand. And I think we need something like this in place because these requests, I think, are going to continue. There are other schools flying different flags on their flagpoles because of similar requests. And I think having a policy in place with specific guidelines is the right way to go about trying to evaluate and decide what we are or are not going to put on the flagpoles. So regardless of how we might feel about particular flags, the policy itself, I think, is sound and gives us a good starting place for figuring out how we can make those decisions. So I'm supporting the policy.
Thank you, John. Now, George, sorry about that.
Not a problem. I always enjoy John's thoughts on topics. We often disagree, and that's okay. I mean, that's the system that we live in. I hope we live in. Anyways, I want to thank folks that have worked so hard on this, and I know that you've spent many hours on it. I also understand folks that feel that we should be able to have this ability to promote different causes. But my concern is, as usual, for the best well-being for our school district. This policy will not in any way prevent somebody by filing some kind of a lawsuit, even though if it's dismissed as frivolous, which is quite often the case. It'll still cost time and effort and money to deal with it. So my concern is still in that realm versus any particular cause that I'm for or against. I'm done.
Thank you, George. Was there someone else? Maria, was it you? Yes.
I just keep hearing people say that our decision about the flagpole is divisive and that we're divisive by making this decision. And I disagree. I don't feel like we're being divisive at all. I think our intention, it was related to our equity plan. Now it's a separate policy that isn't specifically about equity, but it's still related. And I feel like, no, our goal is to bring our student community and our school community together and show our respect and support for groups that haven't felt that in our state and in our country and in our school system. And I just feel like people are projecting their insecurity on efforts to lift up our community, and that it's been proven that these kinds of efforts, the thing that we've put into our equity plan, are actually going to improve the school experience for everybody, not just for specific students that maybe that flag represents. And I just want us to be able to keep talking about it. I think that's important, but being accused of being divisive, that doesn't help any of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
So, Tammy, I'll just say, appreciate hearing from everybody. I just wanted to share that I was pretty disappointed today when I got that legally threatening letter sent to me. Just kind of knowing how much work has gone into developing this policy and that it's being done in an appropriate way. And coming from a place that it's designed to empower our students and to ensure that we have equity and we have a community that supports all students and supports process. So I just wanted to share that. I was really disappointed by that. And I hope that that threat of legal action isn't impacting some of the conversation that we're having tonight, because that's the opposite of what we were trying to do.
Thank you, Amy. George.
Yes, Madam Chair, and when you come to call for the vote, I would appreciate a roll call vote.
Sure, absolutely. We could do that. Any other input, discussion? Okay, hearing none. And you're going to make me have to do, I'm doing it in the order that you're on my screen, which is not necessarily alphabetical, so that I don't miss anybody. So Andy, you're the first one that I see. Andy is a yes. George, you're second.
Abstain.
George abstains. Liz.
I vote in favor.
Yes. Len.
No.
Len is a no. BJ.
In favor.
Thank you. Maria.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
And John.
Yes.
Okay, and I am a yes. So I believe that the fly policy passes for a first reading. Would that be correct, Dave? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was telling 9 to 1 to 1 for
Just
first reading. So we will warn it for approval at our next board meeting, which is December 2nd. Len, sorry, you got the 4th from me. I messed that up earlier. I apologize.
Okay. Anything else, BJ?
No, I think we're doing good. So our next policy meeting will probably be the first Tuesday in the month at 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to negotiations. Adrian.
Actually, hey, Tammy, really quickly, can I make a correction? 8 to 1 to 1. I was thinking we had 11 members present, but Doug had to leave. So it was 8 to 1 to 1.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure whether we wanted to go into executive session to have a more complete conversation on negotiations, or just wait till the end of the meeting when, I mean, I have no reason to do it now.
Yeah, we have an executive session at the end of the meeting anyway, so we could just do it for both things if that works.
Yes,
okay?
That's
All
fine. Thank you.
right. John, building and ground.
So Len, the only reason I knew that it was the second was because I had to look up what the date was for the next Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, so don't feel too bad. We haven't had a meeting since actually since I think October. Our next meeting is December 1st at 6 o'clock. So that's all we got. And I plan to follow up with Gary a little bit on that HVAC grant to see what we're doing and how that money's being spent, so we can just have that information. So that's one of the things that we are going to talk about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Maria, community engagement.
Hi. First, I just want to apologize to anybody who was expecting to come to a meeting last night and didn't, because our previous meeting, the things that we wanted on the agenda were dependent on there being a board meeting. The board meeting was
over here thinking it was a dog.
Was postponed. Then I canceled the meeting, and I'm sorry that I was not able to let non-board members know about that. So that said, what we talked about at our last meeting was related to that goal that we achieved of creating a community engagement plan. It was based on a lot of in-person opportunities to really engage with people. And now that we cannot do that, we're making an adjustment. And the main adjustment is trying to pull together an informal gathering once a month with 2 or 3 board members and whoever from the community would like to come. And this would be with the purpose of learning what people are thinking about and clarifying issues and answering questions and providing information to the extent that we have it. We wouldn't take action. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't be formal at all. It would be like a board meeting, but it would be an opportunity to have conversations together. And I know that this is a long meeting, so I don't want us to have to spend a long time discussing it. But what we'd like to be able to do is go back to the community engagement meeting committee next when we meet again and make a really specific plan for that. So I guess what I'd like to hear from my fellow board members is if you have any concerns or expectations or questions about how that might play out, or yeah, reservations.
Anyone? BJ.
Yeah, the only thing I just want to, I don't know if it's a caution or what, but I love the idea of getting community members together. I just want to note that the voice of people who are able to attend these meetings and the voice of people who are not definitely share equally. So I just, for the community, please attend these things. I think it's great to see these people in person-ish. In a conversational way. I think we get a lot more out of it when we hear things in conversation. But like I said, we want to hear from everybody in both manners.
Exactly. And maybe it can be accompanied. We'd still have need a sort of maybe a more of a system for getting feedback. I mean, right now people can write to us and that seems to be working. So that's been one positive thing lately, as we have been hearing from many people. But this is just one more way to do it. We were also thinking of having it be a sign up so that there wouldn't be so many people that we couldn't have a useful conversation, potentially have a topic, potentially not. But Tammy, do we have to does the board have to approve this, or does there need to be a motion, or can we just take it back?
What I think you could do, Maria, is get consensus of the board if they're interested, because it relies on board member participation to make it successful. And if most people are on board with volunteering to spend some time, for a Zoom meeting type scenario once a month, then I think you can go back to the Community Engagement Committee and come up with a more formalized plan and bring that back for a motion and approval. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And it wouldn't be that much of a commitment, really, if it was sort of 2 or 3 people once a month. It wouldn't be you every month or every week. How are people feeling about it? Maybe give a... Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And so we're going to meet on Tuesday, the 24th. Am I right? Tuesday, the 24th at whatever time we were going to meet before, 6:30, I believe.
Okay, great. Thank
you.
Liz, finance.
I'm checking my calendar to make sure I have that on my calendar. So anyway, good evening, everyone. So I have the following payroll warrants for approval. They are dated tonight, November 18th. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. I have different payroll warrants. I have one dated October 23rd in the amount of $540,267.92. I have one dated October 30th in the amount of $6,207.02. I have a payroll warrant dated November 6th in the amount of $411,578.28. And finally, I have a payroll warrant dated November 16th in the amount of $6,071.58 for a total of $964,124.80. Next, I have the following pay orders. First, from the general fund, I have a pay order in the amount of $92,292.25. I have a pay warrant also from the general fund in the amount of $6,254.48. And lastly, I have a pay warrant from the lunch program in the amount of $14,941.93 for a total of $113,488.66. And I move that we approve these pay orders and the payroll as presented.
Second.
Thank you, George. Is there discussion? Yes, George.
Hi, I reviewed the payrolls and the pay orders earlier today. The only thing I've found of concerning, I already mentioned to Gary, and I guess he's going to look at it again. I'm done.
And I can actually clarify, George
Oh, okay.
and Gary, if that's helpful, because I looked at this right before the meeting. So I believe it was Earl's Trucks, and it was
Yeah.
in the amount of about $16,000.
That's correct. And the way I was reading it, it was all for a truck. I think it must be for school buses as well.
Yeah, Earl's Truck Repair is where we get our buses serviced.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the pay orders and payroll as read, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Anything else, Liz?
I'll just add that, let's see if I can read my notes. My contacts are, I can't see it of them at this hour. So we're next meeting on November 23rd, which is Monday. And that's it.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll move on to, oh, sorry.
What time is it?
I was going to ask the same question.
I'm sorry, thank you so much. On November 23rd, we are meeting at 4:30 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, or else we'd all know when we were meeting, but not exactly when we were meeting. Okay, so we move on to transact other legal business. George.
Hi. I'd like to talk about a couple of things briefly. First and foremost, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing with myself on these holidays. Normally, I'll have an event of 20 plus people, family. This year, it'll be 3 of us. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The other item is I'd like to compliment all of us this evening on the Black Flag discussion. We had some differences of opinions, and we all remained civil and polite with each other. And I think it's important that we continually monitor that behavior in view of everything that's going on in our state and country. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Agenda building. So for our December 2nd meeting, not the 4th, but the 2nd, what do we have? Liz, did you have something?
I would just like to ask for additional time at that meeting to discuss and present the work that we are doing on the budget, on the fiscal year. Is that 22?
Okay, great.
22 budget.
Excellent. We're going to do first, approval of the 2 policies. Yes, okay.
Tammy, would you like, we did administrative reports tonight. Would you like our customary first meeting of the month reports?
Yeah.
No problem.
And
Tammy, could we put in an executive session so that the full board can discuss the evaluation?
Yep. Thank you, Len, for reminding me of that. Okay. Anything else? I think that's quite a full meeting. Okay. So then we do have a need for executive session. So we need actually 3 different motions. Our first reason for an executive session is evaluation of a public employee. So would someone make that motion? Thank you, Len.
Second.
Second. Thank you, George. All those moving into executive session for purposes of evaluating a public employee, please give me the thumbs up. Anyone opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? And then the second reason we need to go into executive session is we have some contract negotiations that we need to discuss. Having those discussions in public session, I think we would all agree would be counterproductive to our negotiation strategy on those contracts. So would someone please care to make that motion? Thank you, Liz. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of a finding of that premature public knowledge of contract negotiation discussions by the board would put the board at a substantial disadvantage, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed? Okay, and then would someone make the motion to move into executive session for that same reason?
So moved.
Thank you, George. A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor? Thumbs up. Anyone opposed? Okay, so we will go into executive session. I don't anticipate that there would be any action taken coming out of executive session on either of those things. So I think for anyone who's watching the meeting, we would be concluding our meeting here as far as the public is concerned. I would ask everyone to jump into your email. Dave sent us links to an executive session, and join in that link, and we can meet for those two purposes. Thank you all. And to everyone watching, happy, healthy Thanksgiving, folks. Please, let's keep our schools open. Do what we have to do. Thank you.